what better way to spend Sunday morning than in the sunshine, drooling over GT cars, as another whopping grid of GT4 European Series entries heads towards the grid here at Paul Ricard. It's the second race of the weekend. Yesterday's was a really good, really lively race, and as the track temperature nudges north of 38 degrees, the humidity 88%, it's a busy, busy circuit that we are looking forward to for this second race, with great variety in this GT4 European Series. And on pole position going into this race, the car in the hands of Enzo Juliet and Luc Ibanez, Luc Ibanez being the start driver. Yesterday's race was a real cracker, won by Mike David Ortmann and Hugo Sassa, who took honours by 3 seconds in the end, but it was a race that kept us guessing in terms of a result all the way to the end. David Addison and Ben Constanduros are trackside, and we're looking forward to a repeat, really, of what we had yesterday, because we had some great racing across the 1 hour yesterday in the opening GT4 race of the weekend, Ben.
Yeah, and slightly interrupted, of course, by a safety car period just before the pit lane window opened. So all of our pro drivers or more experienced drivers setting the gaps for their less experienced drivers to jump into the cars. And then, unfortunately, just before we got those less experienced drivers in the cars, we had a safety car period which bunched the pack up. So the likes of the Pro-Ams of Jim Pla, for instance, showing with Jean-Luc Boblic, they weren't able to capitalise on the performance of Jim Pla in the first part of the race because it was null and void once the safety car came out.
Indeed. So, well, we'll see what pans out in today's race. It's always lively with this many cars on the grid. We have 50 cars set to go racing. Luc Ibanez's Mercedes is on pole position. He will start, and Enzo Juliet will do the second stint. He's with Gemma Scott.
Enzo, yesterday you managed P11, I believe it was, down to P3. Today you guys are starting on pole. That's a much nicer way to be starting the race.
Yes, for sure. Luc made a really good quali yesterday, and he will finish the job properly. And I will intend to make a second stint really good, and yeah, the objective is clear. We want to win.
Absolutely. Now, of course, the temperatures are very rapidly rising throughout the course of the morning. Is that going to have any impact on the performance of the car?
Yeah, I think all the car will have an impact of it. When it's hot, the engine is not working really well, but it's the same for everyone, so can do nothing.
Have a great race. Thanks, Enzo.
Thanks.
So Enzo Juliet switching cars, switching teams for this season. And Luc Ibanez, we know, is a very rapid driver, very successful in this Mercedes that replaced the Ginetta with which he raced a few seasons ago.
It's an interesting point that he makes about the engine not feeling as performant. We're not really that high in terms of the altitude of the circuit, but because of the temperature of the air, we all know that when the temperature of the air drops and it's very humid, the engine likes that. The engine performs better when it's got cold, wet air in it. It's quite dry and it's quite hot here, and so the drivers are all complaining that the cars are not feeling as fast as they should be.
Double winner at Imola, Gus Bowers and Konstantin Lachnauer. They start third today. Konstantin is with Gemma.
Konstantin, we always see you with a huge smile on your face, no matter what. And here, starting P3, the objective once again is clear.
Well, we're starting off a great position. We've got the front row right in front of us, so we know we've got the pace. Just a matter, as always, to put everything together, make the pit stop as good as we can, keep the pace, and do no mistakes, score points for the championship, and yeah, just give it our best. And the team's done an amazing job. We got good points yesterday, P4, so yeah, just looking forward to the race now.
Absolutely, and Gus is quite an aggressive start there for him. He's you know, you guys are a great pairing.
We've got great pace, both of us, great performance, really reliable, and that's really important for our goal for the championship. And yeah, so just really happy of what Gus did in his qualifying, so we've got good chances for the race now.
Thank you, have a great race.
Thank
Cheers.
Konstantin Lachnauer does the second stint today. It's one driver, one session, and you start the race for which you set the qualifying time. So one driver does Q1, another driver, of course, does the second qualifying session and starts this race. So Gus Bowers, it will be starting in number 10. And yesterday's winners of Hugo Sassa and Mike Ortmann will be fourth on the grid. Christophe Amon will be fifth, and Luca Bosco starting sixth. Christophe Amon's Audi number 69, the bright yellow car you can see there. That's number 34 of Luca Bosco, the Salazar Racing Team Mercedes. And that car, again, one to watch because it's an experienced team. And Luca Bosco and the American driver, Alexander Papadopoulos, proved to have good car speed in yesterday's race. So 5 minutes to go to the start of the formation lap. The grid, if I say is based on the qualifying times of yesterday, that, Ben, is affected by the fact that we have quite a few grid drops from assorted dramas.
A couple of grid drops, as come to expect in GT4 racing so far. We had a few in race 1 carried over from Imola, and we have a few in this one carried over from race 1 where there were a few drivers over-optimistic about their opportunities to overtake. So the number 22 car is dropping down a couple of grid positions. So is number 53, and so is 63. We'll go through exactly why in a second.
Mike, looking very calm at this point ahead of the race. You're obviously taking the second stint.
Yeah, we take a second stint. Hugo, we're doing a great job, I think. We will look forward to have a good race. Yesterday went quite well. Let's see if we can do the same today.
There's a lot of activity down here with Pirelli and people looking at the tyres. Is there any expected issues?
No, it's all fine. They're just checking like they normally do.
Thank you very much. Have a great race.
Mike Ortman then, graduate of single-seater racing. Right, back to my court reporter.
Yeah, car 53 is the Codes ASP Mercedes. That's got a 3-place grid drop, so it's down in 26th position. No, 46th position on the grid, such as the amount of cars we have. Just ahead of them will be the Arcada Racing, Thomas Martinez, Pierre-Laurent Figuere. They had a penalty from race 1, and they've got a penalty in race 2. They've not had a very much fun weekend. And just ahead of them in a couple of rows, the Andronico and Andres Mail car, which didn't qualify particularly well in race 1, got a lap time in race 2, but only down on the 19th row of the grid. That's been dropped a couple of positions also for a passing mover that failed in race 1. One last car to note is the AGS events Aston Martin. They've really not had a very fun weekend at all. Problems in free practice, problems in qualifying. They didn't really do qualifying in for the second race anyway. They've changed the whole car, chassis, engine, the works, and therefore, due to the regulations, they will start at the end of pit lane. They were due to start right at the back of the field anyway, but they will start from the pit lane, which might be a benefit because they might clear some of the chaos at the first couple of turns. It's not quite as warm as we saw yesterday. I'm sure it's feeling warm down on the grid, but 25.8 degrees is the gantry temperature, and the track temperature therefore won't be quite where we were at yesterday, which was around 43 degrees.
You mentioned that car starting from the pit lane. It also has a time penalty of 10 seconds added to the pit stop as well, so there's a sort of double penalty for having to change the car and the chassis. The Segway making its way down the grid. It's a good job it's a Segway rather than anything with fuel, for it would need refueling, such is the length of the grid. There is the last car on it, Alex Voller and Ricard Distel in the second of the Greystone GT McLarens. Yesterday, Tim Whale was having a good run in the car that he shared out of that same stable with Adam Carroll. There'd been contact that we didn't see with a Porsche that did enough damage to cause a fluid leak, and it was fluid onto Tim's tyres that eventually caused him to spin and go off into the gravel. So it looked as though it was a driver error, whisper it, but it was really induced by the fact that this fluid had got onto the tyres and hence the traction disappeared.
Yes, he fell off coming onto the Mistral straight, didn't he? Quite an inconspicuous left-hand kink, which tends to be just an acceleration zone. So the fact that he ended up in a gravel trap that we finally discovered existed here at Paul Ricard was quite unusual, and so that explains exactly why that happened.
The Porsche, somewhat robust, had made contact, 9 places lost in about 3 corners, then the fluid leaked out, and then off went a very frustrated Tim Whale. So we'll see what pans out today. 15 seconds to go. That's the board at the front of the grid. The cars will follow the leading car for this formation lap, and then the rolling start to get us underway. And on pole position then is going to be Luc Ibanez. Interesting alongside is the Chevrolet Camaro in the hands of Kenny Heremans. Gus Bowers starts third, Hugo Sassa fourth, Christophe Amon and Luca Bosco on the next row of the grid. Akil Rabindra and then number 89 of Julien Lambert come next. So the field accelerates away and expect battles all the way up and down the order in this race. So it is Luc Ibanez and Kerry Heremans on the first row of the grid. Gus Bowers shares row 2 with Hugo Sassa, and then it's Christophe Amon and Luca Bosco on the third row of the grid as the cars work their way there from turn 1, that left-right flick. Christophe Amont and Luca Bosco, row 3 of the grid. Row 4 is where you find Akhil Rabindra, and alongside him is going to be Julien Lambert. The Aston Martins both. The 5th row of the grid, Vincent Beltoise and Robert Conseny, with the 6th row being the Toyota Supra in the hands of Romain Monti, and the Porsche of Alexander Hartley. That could be one to watch. The 7th row, Erwin Bastard lines up alongside Tom Verdier, Audi and Aston Martin. The 8th row of the grid, there is the Autosport GP entry of Pierre Sonsinena, and alongside is Will Burns. Row 9 is where you find Laurent Hergon, and alongside him is Timon Nabours. The 10th row of the grid, Tim Whale, and alongside is Eric Debar, sharing with Simon Gachet. Row 11 of the grid, Robert Haub and former F3 racer Jason Tahinci alongside. The 11th row is completed by him. The 12th row is Loic Villiger to start, and Max Kronberg's Porsche alongside. The 13th row, Jean-Luc Boberly will go first, Paolo Maloney alongside him, ahead of Ivan Jacoma and Jakub Knoll alongside for the NM Racing Team in another of the Mercedes. On the 15th row, there is Benoit Lisson, the Team 4 Motorsports, and Jean-Laurent Navarro, ahead of Corentin Suron and Greg Faisal, who is going to be a driver to keep an eye to, sharing with Adrien Tombe. On the 17th row of the grid, there is Alban Lagrange and Alexander Weintraub for, again, the NM Racing Team squad. Mauro Ricci is on the 18th row with Marc Lopez alongside him. Andrei Solokovtsev is on the 19th row with Andreas Mayel, of whom Ben was talking earlier, but he still could be a man to watch. Christian Gysi is on the 20th row alongside Fabien Michel with work to do. Then you have Johan Vannerum lining up alongside Rodrigue Guillon, and then it is Olivier Estève and Pierre-Laurent Figuier on the next row of the grid. The 23rd row, Olivier Forzano, he lines up alongside Christophe Bourret. The 24th row, Moritz Gysi will start, and Henrik Pedersen is aboard number 18. And then the last car on the grid, Ricard Distel for Greystone. And then starting from the pit lane is going to be Hugo Condé for the AGS Events team. Right, that's a long, big grid. We got through it with a few corners to go before the start of the race.
Thank God it's a long lap.
Well, absolutely, absolutely right. But it does illustrate just how successful this formula has become over the last few seasons. And also, it's perhaps inevitable to a degree, but it's a very French feel, particularly here, not just because we are in France, but because the French GT Championship runs for GT4 regulations. So lots of the teams in this championship double date by doing the French series as well. And because they do that, they've got the data, they know this circuit, and perhaps do have the advantage over one or two of the teams that come from the equivalent championship in Germany. They're not as used to this circuit and its nuances.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got a decent following also in the UK as part of the grid for British GT, as a shared grid, which is, again, slightly unusual. A different kind of format to, as you say, what you see in France.
Yes, there's quite often talk of going purely in that direction, but the GT3 grid always bounces back. So
also, it's good, isn't it, to have the training of multi-class racing. Obviously, when you progress up into European level into GT3, then you don't have the traffic again. But I always like multi-class racing. It provides an extra layer to a 1 hour or 3 hour race.
I agree with you on that, definitely. Right. For this race, then, it is 50 GT4 cars. One will join in from the pit lane. The other 49 make their way up towards the Virage de la Tour. They will turn towards Virage du Pont, and then we will be in business. And as ever, if you can get around the first 2 or 3 corners safely, then you've got a reasonable chance. But the Kenny Herriman's driven Chevrolet Camaro, definitely one to watch with all of that grunt. Best qualifying we've seen out of the car. Kenny Herriman's new to the championship this year then. So in the backdrop of the mountains, they come out of the Virage du Pont up towards the lights on the gantry, which will change in a moment to get the race underway. Any second then, the 4th race of the year in the GT4 European Series is go. And it is Lucky Bagnaia that makes the best start then. The Mercedes outdrags the Chevrolet on the run down towards turn 1. Up the inside line goes Gus Bowes. To the outside line there goes Hugo Sassa, yesterday's winner. And as they dive into turn 1, the extra car ready to join in for the pits, and inevitably some go exploring on the inside there through that first sequence, the left and right, that brings them down to the chicane.
Got to be very careful not to gain too many positions when you do that, because it's the safe way to go to get yourself out of trouble, and we don't seem to have too much trouble at those first couple of corners. But if you suddenly go from 15th to 7th, race control will be very aware, and it's very possible to do here. There is a route through that part of this corner. They have to go round the chicane.
And so Lot's getting it wrong there. Audi's amongst them. The cars skip back onto the circuit. Now, of course, it could be that people are missing out corners because they picked up damage and therefore can't get the cars turned or slowed. But onto the Mistral straight they come for the first time. Then mandatory pit window, remember, between 25 and 35 minutes of the race as the field blasts now up towards the chicane that breaks up the straight. And it is Ivaniev from Heremans. Now, Gus Bowers has dropped back into fourth, hasn't he? It's Hugo Sasser just up the road ahead then as the cars come through. And now accelerate. Well, some again skip the chicane altogether there. Come back onto the Mistral, and now this run towards the right hand of Seat at the top of the lap.
We have lost a couple of cars, including the number 3 of Constantini, the Team Speed car Audi, missing after the first sector, has appeared with a very slow sector. Yep. That's a transponder issue then for that car.
No, I think he's been off the road, hasn't he? I think if he's done a minute and 23, he's had an off.
Missed the loop.
Yeah.
No, he's missed the transponder for the first sector.
He's just, well, he's gone through it now, but yeah, he's gone through the second sector. But yes, he's badly delayed, that is for sure. So he is still circulating. We have lost one or two others as well that didn't go through that loop, like Jakob Knoll. But yes, if you're not
so
on the
far
circuit,
off the track,
yeah, you can't get picked up, can you? So that was on the run down towards the chicane. Right, battle on here, look, as Christophe Amon tries to fend off the attacking Aston Martin behind that. Julien Lambert getting onto the back of the Audi. Up towards the timing line they come at the end of lap 1. Right, now we can start to unravel an order as you see number 3 go through there, Robert Consani, and he stays on the racetrack. Others around him don't do so this time. The easy bit is Luc Ibanez leads by 7/10 from Kenny Heremans. In third place is Sasser, fourth is Bowers. 5th is Christophe Amon, but only just. 6th is Julien Lambert. Akira Bindra 7th. Robert Consani is in 8th. 9th is Luca Bosco, and 10th is Vincent Beltoise now.
Yeah, so the 51 is heavily slowed. Knoll aboard that machine and actually is going to come across the line in penultimate position, but Constantly is okay in that Burger King sponsored car that we saw in quite a lot of strife yesterday, but is still up in 8th position despite missing the transponder to end the first sector, which was around this particular corner. So far off the track he was that he actually missed the loop.
And we've got one that has stopped on the circuit, which is number 8 Toyota of Corentin-Suron. That's not going any further as a challenge is made there. Cayman versus McLaren, the two run together, heading now onto Mistral Straight. What progress of one or two others from further back in the pack. Andreas Meyer up into 34th as he tries to get on with the job. Tim Whale 21st and busy battling with Laurent Hergon. As there, Christophe Amon once again has to think about getting defensive, and he is defensive enough to keep Julien Lambert at bay. This is the AM class lead battle.
Mistral Straight broken up by that chicane for the GT4s. This weekend, such as, and remember, some of these drivers will be a bronze driver with lacking experience in comparison to the silver drivers that we have. We will then see the better of the two drivers jump into the car for the second half of the race, but there's quite a big field spread in this first part.
There is indeed, as they come then now through Beausset. We've got the AMs, the Pro-Ams and the Silvers. Now the silver cars will be quicker race long because you've got good drivers of comparable pace. The Pro-Ams rise and fall a little bit. The AMs in a sense are comparable pace, but they're the less experienced or the more gentleman drivers that have their own battle. But it's not exactly at the back of the field, is it? 5th and 6th, Hamon and Lambert. So you go silver, Pro-Am, silver, silver, Am. Replay of the start as the car stormed away from the line, and a really good getaway that by Luc Ibanez to hang on to the advantage as 49 cars come charging into the first corner. From another angle, you look down as people dart left and right looking for a clear bit of track space on the way to the first turn. But if you find yourself on the wrong line, it can all go wrong, and it can certainly all go wrong coming through the chicane where it's great variety of line applied. I think one or two tripped over themselves there, and the easiest option was just to bail out and go across the runoff.
Yeah, interestingly, the number 3 car was on track there, so I think he's got a transponder issue rather than missing the loop, because even on this lap he's missed the first 2 sectors. So that particular car is going to be jumping up and down our leaderboard every time it refreshes due to a little bit of a transponder issue, which usually is something plumbed into the car, powered by the electrics of the car. You can get battery-powered ones that you clip into the wheel arch, but most real race cars, rather than go-karts, have one that's plumbed into the battery of the car.
We've had other drivers in other championships blaming the heat for their fatigue or for the cars. Well, can we apply that to a transponder as well? Yeah. The temperature, clearly. The leader, though, Luc Ibanez, a Spanish driver, getting away now from Kenny Heremans, and the Chevrolet there in second place, being caught a little bit by Hugo Sasser. So the car that won yesterday, Hugo Sasser and Mike Ortman, the two drivers for Pro Sport Racing, They won by 3 seconds yesterday. They could be on for a double here because they're inching back into the mix, aren't they? The fastest lap, though, has been done by Heremans, and Julien Lambert, who is ahead of Christophe Amont, is being told he's got to give back 1 position for gaining by cutting out turn 2, going off the road and gaining a position.
Yeah, turn 2 being the right-hand part of that first chicane, which is a bit off camber. You can run a bit wide on the left-hand side, which is against regulations, as well as cut the corner on the inside. Actually a bit more harder to do because there is a bit of rumble strip there, and lots of people experimenting with different lines through senior. Now with plenty of grip after 6 hours of GT3 racing.
Oh, that was it ever. That was Lambert giving back his position. So Christophe Amont is restored as the leader of AM, and he might argue he had to fight for that, but Julien Lambert did put out little resistance. There, number 3, Robert Constantly, keeping Luca Bosco at bay. Now Bosco has dropped back, hasn't he, from where he was on the grid. I had a feeling that car was better placed than that. Yeah, 6th, Luca Bosco started, and he's now running down in 9th spot. This is the AM lead battle, which is an absolutely fierce one, and it illustrates, doesn't it, how the BOP works, because the Aston and the Audi, very different types of race car. Bosco dives up the inside of Constantly and makes that stick. That was a good pass.
Very nice. Very easy to defend that pass, but obviously Constantly deciding not to. A few cars going to the wrong side of the floppies at the final turn. Not somewhere that you really benefit taking advantage by running out too wide. And side by side now for second in that group, as Rabindra tries to make his way up. And I think actually Rabindra's lost a place there to Lambert once more.
I think you might be right. So Lambert goes back ahead of Immaculate Rabindra, who is a silver. In theory, ought to be ahead of Lambert, but he was briefly, and now he wants to fight back. Constantly is next in the queue, so Constantly has gone back ahead of Luca Bosco through turn 1 into the chicane. And have a look what's cropped up into 10th place now. Romain Monti in the Toyota Supra that was there or thereabouts yesterday, but couldn't quite match the pace of the winning car. They got second yesterday in the CMR Supra, Romain Monti and Antoine Potti. That car now running in 10th place, creeping into the mix. And 11th in the blue, the bright blue BMW, Will Burns, the British GT4 champion within British GT last year.
Another car with potential transponder issues is Gus Bowers, so don't get too worried about him jumping up and down the order either, as Christophe Amont does a really good job of defending here, but he's creating quite a train behind him by doing so. The battle for AM lead between these two, although, and with then Rabindra watching on and Constantine behind. These two well ahead of the next AM class car, side by side towards senior, and trying to go around the outside. Is that going to work for him? Has he got the apex, or will he have to run wide? Lambert completes the move further back, still battling going on. Audi up the inside.
And off the circuit, and the door is wide open for Luca Bosco to get 2 places out of that. So through on the inside, Rabindra loses out, and then he gets back ahead of Constantly. So 1 up and 2 down for Robert Constantly. He gained the place by being, you could argue, off the road and up the curb, but it didn't really help him in the end anyway. Luca Bosco absolutely dived through. The road just opened up ahead of him, and boom, through he went.
And there's that Toyota you're mentioning, Monti. I was about to say Roberto Meri, which is a completely different driver altogether.
It is. Romain Monti.
Romain Monti
is the man in the Supra, and whoops, Will Burns getting all crossed up there. That was a good save.
Oh, he kept it facing the right direction, just ahead of that Toyota. And there's plenty going on here. I think kind of because we have this little queue of cars behind our two, and they really want to clear them. Bosco's done a good job of getting up to second in queue now. Although a little bit off the back of Lambert, and actually they're starting to get away from Christophe Amont. So Amont, with the pace at Imola, and was pretty good yesterday afternoon, but seemingly struggling in these early laps as Romain Monti invents a brand new circuit, one of 168 now different layouts of the Paul Ricard circuit.
That's the Monti line. We had a change for second in the race. Hugo Sasser has got past Kenny Heremans, as there another exploration is undertaken by Vincent Beltoise. He ought to know better. He's done many a lap around here. So yesterday's winners are now in second place. There is the lead gap, 0.8 of a second. Hugo Sasser has now done the fastest lap of the race, and it is now game on as he inches up onto the back of Luc Ibaniev coming into the chicane. Remember that when we get to 25 minutes, the pit window opens. We've had just the first 10 minutes of the race as there Kenny Heremans go through, but it's all looking pretty lively around him. Gus Bowers is 4th. And is now Gus Bowers inching up onto the tail. He's another one with a transponder gremlin, but his last lap was quicker. So Bowers, in real terms, is closing on the Chevrolet now.
2 cars in the pit lane. Albin Lagrange, who unfortunately retired pretty early on yesterday in the 28 Mirage. And also, we have Jason Tahinci in the BMW, unfortunately, out of the race, or certainly in the pits in the second of the Borusan Automotive BMWs.
Okay, so it's too early for it to be the mandatory stop. Now, Will Burns comes up to have a go at Robert Constany. This is for 9th place overall. The BMW that always looks a bit more like a touring car than a GT car, kind of towers over the low-line Audi. But Will Burns used one of these cars to win in the British Championship last year. That was with Century Motorsport, this with Borusan Automotive. And they operate a good team, certainly the Turkish squad, who arrived here last year but were unable to race for various COVID-related issues. Well, right now, Will Burns doing a really, really fine job as he hustles along. There are the race leaders. The gap is 7/10 of a second. On that lap, another 10th pull back by Hugo Sassa. Look back for third. It remains Kenny Heremans ahead of Gas Bowers. Then it is Lombert from Bosco, Amon from Rabindra, Constany and Burns to round out the top 10.
That last lap, Sassa only taking a 10th of a second out of Ibanez. And Ibanez really was very strong in his qualifying session, remember. Even with various issues that he encountered and laps being taken away, he was still able to secure the pole position. So had, of this group of drivers, certainly had the pace. We're trying to go 3 wide here around the first part of the lap, which is a little tricky.
And in doing so, Romain Monti actually stayed on the circuit on this lap. He's in the middle of all of that. Whoops. The Alpine there gets all squirrely behind once more, so Beltois still hustles on. We've got, incidentally, Andreas Mayr still gaining places in the portion that he'll give over to Vincent Andronico, which is a quick car. Monti then leans a little bit on the Aston as the two of them run through absolutely side by side. So Monti versus Rabindra. The Aston Martin is just ahead as they come onto the Mistral straight. Further up the road, Alex Hartvig in the Cayman from the Allied Racing stable. Romain Monti lines up for a go on the inside line, doesn't he? Coming up towards the chicane, but he's going to have to be really, really brave to do it. He commits, forces the Aston out wide, and that skips the chicane.
Well, that is an interesting line, because look how much he's going to benefit. He's also going to have the momentum, so he's going to have to fade out of the throttle to allow all these cars past. And then if you do that, you then don't have the momentum up the rest of the Mistral straight, so everyone starts filing past. We'll find the rightful place for him to slot back in here.
It's Timon Nabours, isn't it, who has gone from the V8 racing team at the Chevrolet to an Aston Martin this year. So Timon Nabours at the start of the lap was 15th, and he's yo-yoed his way around the circuit. 44 there is Alexander Hartvig. Here is the fight going on between Julien Lombert and the rapidly closing Luca Bosco. That's 5th and 6th. Robert Constany through ahead of Will Burns there. Number 14, Erwin Bastard, who will give that car over the yellow and white Santa Audi to Roy Meerhaus for the second part of the race. And 47 in the midst of all of that is Tim Whale, being monstered by the little Alpine behind him. But he's gone through, has he? Laurent Hergon is the Alpine driver. So the Alpine and the McLaren, again, two very different ways of cracking the GT4 problem.
Yeah, absolutely, and a car, the Alpine, not really suited to this circuit. There's lots of little circuits in France. They're kind of akin to what we would see in the UK, for instance, but this very much an F1 style, big, long circuit, and the Alpine just doesn't have the grunt for it, really. It's much better suited on the fiddly stuff.
Number 27 is under investigation for cutting the circuit and gaining places on the opening lap. We'll come to that in a moment. Replay of the Tim Whale, Laurent Hergon battle. And there's a touch there. Tim Whale's car getting tagged and tagged again.
Wouldn't have known that there was an overlap. Whale just going for the apex there, and unfortunately there was an Alpine in the way. Not really much that either of them could have done, other than Laurent Hergon kind of backing out of it. And when do you ever back out as a racing driver?
Adrien Tambay is under investigation, or at least Adrien Tambay's car is, because it's the one he shares with Greg Feisel, and it's under investigation for gaining places by cutting turn 4 on the first lap. That brings you out of that corner in the background onto the Mistral. Right, there's Robert Constany ahead of Will Burns.
I'd say it's a really difficult one for a driver, because you're in the car, you know when you've come off the circuit, you know roughly where you were when you came off the circuit, but only roughly, and by the time you come back on, the orders might have changed, and the car that you were following into the turn that you missed may have been in a different place, and so really hard to know where you're supposed to fall back into line, and from a hindsight point of view, much easier then to tell.
Doesn't it also depend on why you're off the circuit? I mean, if you deliberately go off to overtake somebody, fair enough, but if you've had a moment, or you've been clipped by somebody, or you're trying to avoid an accident, remembering who you were behind is the last thing on your mind.
Yes,
you just want to avoid the mayhem.
Yeah.
So Robert Constany versus Will Burns. Behind them, you've got Erwin Bastard, and the Greg Feisel Audi we were just discussing will be given a 10-second penalty at the first pit stop, or the pit stop, for cutting with gain. So the race officials, Steve Burns, the race director, Peter Roberts, the chairman of the stewards, have a look at the evidence, because there's obviously the pictures that we're looking at, plus the circuit's own CCTV, and they can assess whether there was an advantage and why the car was off the road and make a call accordingly. Now up front, it remains Luc Ibanez ahead of Hugo Sassa. We're heading towards that pit window. Another 9 minutes or so. There in third place in the background, Gus Bowers. So he has caught and passed Kenny Heremans now. And Gus Bowers' lap times not quite as quick as the top two. So Konstantin Lachenauer may be prevailed upon to try and get that car closer to the leaders the other side of the pit stop.
Interesting how close it's got between Ibanez and Sassa. Sassa again taking a couple of tenths of a second. It's now down to 7/10 of a second across the stripes. So really, really close between them. And when you hand over to your second driver, you've got to say it's going to be advantage Aston Martin, with Mike David Ortman jumping aboard that car versus Enzo Juli in the 15 machine that qualified yesterday inside the top 10, but only just. Sassa was right at the sharp end, and that Aston Martin has been working incredibly well. The Mercedes is the other car. If you were to choose this weekend, it would be Aston Martin or Mercedes GT4 car, I think. Although, actually, I'll have a GT3 Mercedes as well for the GT3 race. That looked pretty good.
They were certainly very, very rapid, although Ferrari ended up on top last night, but it was as much down to strategy and circumstance as outright pace. It was a Mercedes that took the fastest lap. Replay of more fun and games here, going down towards turn one. Christophe Amon in the AM class yellow Audi gets a bit of a squeeze and gets turned round by Jean-Luc Bobelic. Was that not? Number 87, it was. So Jean-Luc Bobelic, who was a category winner yesterday, getting involved and turns around. In fact, not Christophe Amon, I'll tell you a lie, number 26 Audi it was. So that is Benoit Lisson, who was on the wrong end of that little bit of a push.
And that was down in 27th and 28th position. So Bobelic giving a lot of work for his more experienced and faster teammate to do in the second half of this race. That should be something interesting to watch.
That teammate, that co-driver being Jim Pla, they were the Pro-Am winners yesterday. Right, the Alpines have got themselves together there. Laurent Hergon in number 55 in the thick of the battle. And Robert Consigny, Will Burns just a little bit up the road. So look at the variety. You've got Porsche squabbling here with Audi. Alpine on the back of it. Owen Bastard goes through. He has latched onto the tail now of Alexander Hartwig. And that means that Hartwig has got ahead of him, therefore. So Hartwig is into the top 10. Owen Bastard down to 11th. Taki Rabindra 12th. I'm a bit surprised here that Rabindra, who will hand over to Tom Canning, isn't further up the order.
In fact, he's gone backwards, hasn't he?
Yeah.
From where he was. He was in the top 5 at the start of the race, but has fallen back. And Tom Canning was right at the sharp end in his Aston Martin at the start of the first race. So another car to watch in the second half of this one as we swap drivers in. Well, the pit lane will open in 6 minutes' time. So if you have a driver that is not necessarily performing as well as your driver standing in the pit lane, then you're going to try and get them swapped over as quickly as possible. There's another of the AGS events. Amazing to know that they had a spare Aston knocking about, that they could stick some new stickers on and make it the number 7 car, which is just moved up a couple of positions, actually, onto our first page of the timing screens. So Hugo Condier is now in 35th spot.
Creeping up the order all the time. So keep out of trouble. Get there at the end. It's not where you are at the end of the first lap. It's at the end of the hour that really counts, as there onto the Mistral Straight comes that fight between Julien Lambert and Luca Bosco for 5th and 6th. Christophe Amon here, 7th. Now, he is 2nd in the AM contest. He was squabbling with Lambert earlier on, but right now he's in danger of losing overall position to Robert Consigny, who comes up on the inside line. Consigny is having a look, but he couldn't commit to the move there. Behind the pair of them, you've got Will Burns in 9th place. So it's Mercedes, Aston, Chevrolet, Aston, Mercedes, Audi, BMW, Porsche, the top 10 right now. The Audis get themselves together here, as now you can see Robert Consigny making his move against Christophe Amon. This is for 7th place overall, and Consigny, as a silver, goes through on the inside of a very quick AM. Forces him out wide, and Burns tries to buy into it.
Hamon trying to go around the outside of Senior, and that's just going to open the door to Will Burns. No way to get back to the apex. He tries to, and Will Burns is there. A little bit of side-to-side contact. But Hamon would have been better off just falling into line there. He's not fighting these guys in terms of class position. He wants to stay as close as possible, of course, to the 89 car, which is a little bit up the road. That is his nearest rival. And that will then give his teammate the best chance to get back onto the top step of the podium. But behind him, you've got to go down 27 positions to the 3rd place in that class.
Well, there is Will Burns, the British driver, going down towards the Virage Dupont. Will, last year's GT4 champion with Gus Burson. in the British Championship, and here in replays how he gained further ground, because as Hamon ran out wide, Will Burns committed to the inside, was able to pounce on one Audi and get onto the tail of Robert Conseny in number 3. So the team speed car Audi fending him off. So there is Will Burns, Ginetta champion, British touring car racer for a season, GT star these days, very much in GT4. Came out of the Castle Combe Saloon Car Championship a good few years ago now, but used that as his first foray into motor racing and has looked mighty impressive ever since, it must be said.
If you are watching from outside of the UK, you might have to Google Castle Combe.
This is true, actually. I do. It's a fair point. It's a great little circuit. Haven't been there for 100 years, it feels like now, but it's a good old-school British track, great for club racing, and has its own one circuit saloon car championship, single-seater championship, and sports car championship. It was out of that saloon, which is a real catch-all series for great variety of saloon cars that Will Burns came, and then moved on and up into Ginetta racing, touring cars for a season, and then towards GT racing, which is where he's making a real name for himself right now.
I've experienced at least 3 of those barriers at Castle Combe.
You have?
Yeah, there's only about 5 corners.
It's quite. Now, Romain Monti is experiencing a big battle right now, because the Aston Martin makes its move to the inside line there, and Tom Verdier tries to find a way through, couldn't quite do it as they come back onto the straight. Robert Haub in the Mercedes, he's right there as well. But Romain Monti is dropping. He was 10th when we first got excited about him. There's something trailing under the car, but he's down to 15th.
Yeah, I wonder if that's plastic or coming from the engine compartment. Either way, he is struggling a little bit and runs a little bit wide. That's going to allow the Aston Martin up the inside. And is there an overlap? Not quite. Door is shut. I thought Robert Haub would take more of an advantage of that, but he runs nice and wide, and the 3 of them actually are being slowed up. So Vincent Beltoise now catches up and makes it a quartet.
So through they all turn, and Romain Monti in the slightly hobbled Toyota Supra continues to drop away.
I think it's the splitter, isn't it?
Yeah, or it's a bit of it.
Yeah.
Yes, it's what's left of it. You might be right. Whoops off the road there. Has gone.
Is that the Hugo
That's
Conde?
Hugo Conde.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. That's a senior. So he gets back onto the circuit. No, it's not. It's Christian Gysi, in fact, in the Aston, the car that he shares with Kellerner's.
I was about to say they've done a great job of getting the livery on that car. It's a brand new car, but it's not the same car.
How did he get there? We'll find out. Christian Gysi turns on the tail of number 7.
Ooh.
Just lost the back of it, and off he went, and off and off and off and off and off and off, and eventually he comes to a halt. Those tyres now very different shape from how Pirelli intended them, but Christian Gysi gets back into the race.
Unusual, really, because it's a pretty fast corner, Senior, and not somewhere where you're kind of loading up the front end and taking away load from the rear. So you don't tend to have those big swappers unless you are completely offline or there is an issue with the car. So it turned around. As soon as he turned in, it turned around.
Did indeed. The good news for him is he's only about a couple of laps away from the pit window opening, so he can bail and let his blood pressure recover and put Ralph Kellerner's into that car. The fastest lap of the race claimed early on by Luc Ibanieff, who is still a second to the good, but it could be a rather different picture during the second stint of the race here, as you see Julien Lambert hanging on to 5th and also hanging on to the AM class lead. Now he will give way to Wilfried Casalbon, who is also not slow. That's a car looking well placed, really, within the AM class.
Unbelievable, wherever you look. Look at the background there, there's cars everywhere. There's battles in the foreground now as well. There is so much going on with all the different levels of driver, and as we get to the end of this stint, the fatigue, of course, setting in with 27, 28 degrees outside, so it'll be warm inside these cars. The drivers will have done a decent amount of work with 25 minutes uninterrupted racing. The tyres will also be perhaps slightly overpressured by this point, because maybe they were not set completely correctly for the rise in temperature, and something that the teams will adjust when they come into pit lane, just to make sure they're in the best working window possible.
88 seconds is the regulation pit stop time, pit in to pit out line, so we'll keep an eye on that and see if everybody adheres to it, because if you don't, you're allowed a 1 second tolerance for a joker pit stop to use in one of the 2 races. There you can see Owen Bastard in the deeper yellow, trying to have a go at the highlighter pen just up the road ahead of him in the hands of Christophe Amon as they come up towards the line. The window is open, and that plays into the hands of those sort of towards the rear of midfield, doesn't it?
Yeah, one of them, one car coming in at the back end of shot, so at least from, yes, 20th position. So Vincent Beltoise and Tim Whale coming in. So Adam Carroll will take over the McLaren, the best placed McLaren in 19th position right now. But as you say, nobody inside the top 20 was really able to take advantage of that, just simply by the timing of the opening of the pit lane. And we've got a yellow flag in sector 2 right now.
Indeed so, and that's the reason, because Christian Gysi, who we'd seen spin, has come to a halt on the following lap, exiting the chicane on the Mistral.
Doesn't quite look as though that right side, as we look at it, is correct. So I wonder whether by spinning over the high-speed, high-friction surface that he's actually punctured the tyre, because that's the whole point of this surface. It's not just a normal tarmac off track. It is high friction to slow you down, and an experiment from Bernie Ecclestone a few years ago. But it does tend to do quite a bit of damage to the tyres if you end up sliding across it, kind of grating it.
Let's have another look. This is the car having had a spin, and it's a puncture. Yeah, so the puncture causes the spin, and Christian Gysi gets going and thinks that doesn't feel right, the car's damaged or it's got a big problem, rather than limp it round, so he stops. Right, pit window is open, and there number 88 comes in to serve its regulation stop. So that is Stanislav Savronov taking over from Alexander Weintraub, and that's the sister car that still leads the race. So Luigi Ibanez stays out, and now the teams will be keeping an eye on that yellow flag in sector 2 to think, well, are we likely to get a full course yellow to remove that? And how does that affect when we call our pit stop?
What's quite interesting about that particular crew is I feel as though both drivers are silver drivers, and so there isn't any real regulations to say which of the two silver drivers is the first driver and which is the second driver. It's driver 2 on our entry list that are starting this race, but it doesn't necessarily mean in a Silver Cup format that that's the less fast driver. And so I feel as though in the number 15 car with Luca Ibanez in the NM Racing machine, they've chosen Ibanez as the faster driver to be against some of the bronzes that we see in this second driver category, whereas we'll see a gold driver, for instance, in Jim Platt in the driver 1 section in the second half of this race. But consensus is that it's the slower driver in first in this race and then the faster driver in second, but I'm not quite sure that's the case with the 15 car.
Yeah, where you've got the silvers, then it's a bit more of a coin toss, isn't it? And the strategy accordingly. But they prefer the pro in the pro-am element to go first, because then they set up the car for the am driver. But yes, where, as you say, the silvers, there's theoretically nothing to choose between them. It's a harder call. So there into the pit lane comes 37. That is the Porsche that's now going to be given to Mikhail Loboda from Andrei Surkotsev. And the lead gap has sort of stabilised around this second and a bit, hasn't it? Because although Hugo Sasser has been pushing on, I think he's going to rely on Mike Ortman's pace in the second stint, and Luc Ibanez will be reliant on what Enzo Gillier can do. So Gillier, we saw in the championship last year, he wasn't slow, he had the odd off, but he was rapid, and he will take over this leading car. And is it going to come in this time then? It's only a 10-minute window, and a lap is, of course, over 2 minutes, so you don't get too many laps. Grace, as I think I'm right in saying, that Sasser there was lining up to come towards the pit lane. It's still busy. Here's the mass exodus of cars that have served their stops.
Yeah, because with the less experienced driver in first, you want to get them out as quickly as possible to get your faster driver in. So in this particular race, the pit lane window is kind of skewed to the start of it, whereas we saw in race 1, it's skewed to the end of it. And I think that's where it's quite interesting when you've got the likes of Ibanez, Sasser and Bowers. You can go into the pits with a relatively quiet pit lane because you've got your faster driver in at the start, and therefore be at the end of the window when everyone else is at the start.
There's the leader picking his way through the traffic then, so it's another lap done for Ibanez, but Sasser did come in, and also Gus Bowers came in. So this could be interesting now, because if Ortman is quicker than Sasser, if Lachenauer is quicker than Bowers, then they are making headway into their stint earlier, and therefore they've got more quick laps available to those cars. So out gets Gus Bowers, in gets Konstantin Lachenauer, those 2 wins at Imola, and in yesterday's race they had a 4th place. 3rd yesterday was the car that leads at the moment, incidentally, of Ibanez and Gillier. Now, the team manager of car number 26 has to go to the race director immediately. That's the Benoit Lisson Cyril Salai Audi, which we saw in an incident earlier on in the race, didn't we?
To sign a piece of paper to say, yes, I will have your penalty, thank you very much.
Quite right, I'm not going to argue. The yellow flag on the Mistral, by the way, has gone in. So that car has been able to be moved, as there you see Luc Ibanez on lap number 14. Now, yesterday we did have a safety car and a full course yellow, but we got 25 laps, so we can anticipate maybe 26, 27 in this race today.
Ibanez getting into the traffic a little bit. There's just the one car, but that might affect his lap on this lap, whereas obviously his rivals in pit lane, Hugo Sassa, now handed over the car and avoiding that traffic. It looks like they've come out in real clear air here.
Well, there is number 10 then. That is Konstantin Lachenauer, and his pace now relative to this car is going to be intriguing to see where it's going to put them through this second stint. Now, will Ibanez be in this time? He doesn't have many more minutes, does he? Because it's less than 4 before the window closes. He could squeeze one more lap out of it, but really that's about all he would want to gamble on. Luc Ibanez comes through the Virage de la Tour and keeps on turning then. So he is going to complete another lap, but he's surely got to be in next time.
Absolutely maximising his stint. So it's interesting to see just how much rubber is down on the circuit since we went racing yesterday. Remember, we did actually have some rain on Friday, and so the track was quite well washed before we started our weekend. Obviously, 6 hours of GT3 racing has laid down a huge amount of rubber, especially in the traction zones like Senior, like Beausset, also where you have multiple racing lines around there. So the track is absolutely covered in rubber, and I wonder what it feels like for these guys who will use a similar compound of Pirelli tyre, whether that actually gives them more grip than what they were experiencing in their first race pre-6 hours.
Could be, certainly. Huge amount of rubber was put down last night, as you can imagine, with 50 cars starting and 6 hours of racing for GT3. So a lot of rubber went down. And right now, Luc Ibanez then the race leader. So the order shuffles as people stop on different laps. There you see more of those little markers to demark the circuit as you come onto the Mistral straight. Good little fight here as Will Burns is busy squabbling then in the BMW. 44 there, I think, has also stopped, has it not? Yes, so Moritz Wiskirchen has taken over in the Porsche, and in fact Becky Besler has taken over from Will Burns in the BMW. So those two have stopped. Different drivers, battle continues. Number 7 is in the pit, so also number 17 Kenny Harriman's there, giving way to Danton Raponge, younger brother of Joop Raponge, who drove that car last year. I still think we should have a regulation that says we need more Chevrolets, because those cars just look and sound great. A proper muscle car, that.
So unusual in comparison to a little Alpine.
It should be Duncan Heisman that drove one of those with great aplomb a long time ago, when the championship had a very Dutch feel to it, because of course the Dutch GT championship is GT4, and lots of the Dutch teams rather dominated the European Series as well, but a different flavour to it these days, as Luc Ibanez is heading up towards the end of the lap and heading to the pit lane, surely, because if he tries to do one more, he'll run out of time.
Fastest lap in race 1 yesterday was a 2:13.8, and already Ibanez has done a 2:13.6, so not remarkably faster than yesterday's pace, but it was done by Simon Gachet, who we've yet to see. Gachet will be getting into, will be the second driver getting into the 81 machine. And now our leader comes in. So Ibanez handing over to Enzo Julien. We need to keep an eye on where those two pursuing Aston Martins are.
Right, Ibanez out, Julien in, and behind we shall keep an eye for Mike Ortmann in 24 and Konstantin Lachenauer in number 10. And then at the end of the pit window we can unravel all of the classes as well. It will be a 25-minute dash to the end. So 98 seconds of the pit stops. The pit stop time for Mike Ortmann was 1 minute and 29.9 seconds. For Lachenauer, it was 1 minute and 29.9 seconds. So evenly matched on track as well as in the pit lane. We have got one car, though, Moritz Wiskirchen's Cayman, that was 1 minute and 27.8. So that's too far under, really, for comfort. And another one that is under is Alex Fontana having taken over from Ivan Jacoma, 1 minute 27.7. So I'm afraid there might be a few penalties coming here because people have been a bit short on the stop. Only a bit, but it's still short.
Oh, 0.3 of a second is just like a breathing on the throttle.
Well, this, as Enzo Julien is set to make his way into the race, is the charging number 24 of Mike Ortmann then. So Mike David Ortmann ready to break the beam as he comes across the line. We'll see now what pace he has in that car relative to the leading Mercedes. They're going to be almost together there as onto the racetrack comes Enzo Julien then. He starts lap number 16 ahead of Mike Ortmann. The gap then, as they cross the line, was 23 seconds, but it will be less than that now as the leading Mercedes starts to get back up to pace, but it's also, of course, exited the pit lane, and the timing line is in the middle of that pit lane itself. So it's certainly less than 23 seconds, but we'll see come the end of the lap what Ortmann can get it down to and what his sector times are like relative to the leading Mercedes. Could be 2 out of 2 for this Aston crew, as it was in Imola for a different Aston Martin team.
Benjamin Lariche in that Burger King sponsored Audi up to 5th position. It will be 4th actually once the little Alpine that crossed the line but in pit lane removes itself off the timing screen. So the number 3 car, from being just outside the top 10 at the start of the race, has really found himself in a strong position with Lariche. See what he can do in the second half of the race. The gaps between our top 5 are quite large. They all kind of feel in the 7 to 10 second mark as they came past our window here. So not big battles on track right now. It's behind Papadopoulos in 6th position that we've got a nice queue of cars with Dante Reponge and Will Casabon part of that little battle.
The AM contest has rather fizzled out because Casabon is 8th and second in AM is Benjamin Ricci, who is 28th. So the number 69 Audi that was there earlier on, no longer featuring Christophe Armand, a retirement a few laps ago. So now we've got Casabon just light years ahead of anybody else. Here are the leaders, and 23 seconds, that sort of phony gap at the start of the lap. In the first sector, the gap had come down. In the second sector, the gap had come down. So certainly Mike Ortmann is making good progress here. And as he comes then up towards the end of the lap, the first sector is kind of irrelevant to a degree here because it was including the slow run down the pit lane from Juliet as he rejoined the circuit, but it's 0.6 of a second in the second sector. That is what Mike David Ortmann has been able to find. So it's that second sector that's the key. Now the gap is about to be confirmed as they come over the line. The beam is broken by Juliet, the clock starts, and so now your starting point between the two of them as they go through is 3 seconds, just over 3 seconds between those two. And as they head now down towards the first corner, the pace that Mike David Ortmann is showing is going to be enough to do this. But of course, this is now only Enzo Juliet's first flying lap, so we haven't seen a lap time out of him yet.
I also just mentioned Simon Gachet, the fastest man in yesterday's race. We're not going to see him in the second race because I'm afraid Eric Delbar has retired the 81 Mercedes also in pit lane. So the car that he shares with Simon will not be out in the second part of the race. It's a shame for Accordes ASP, who were fastest in practice session, and that car was on the front row in the first of our races.
Now the race leaders have gone through the first sector. Another 4.10s pull back by Mike Ortmann. So he's got 22 minutes and he's got 3 seconds to chip away. He's going the right way about it here. Enzo Juliet using all of that grunt in a straight line to try and stabilise the gap. And of course, the more laps he does in the car, so in theory, the quicker he should become because he gets a little bit more sorted, a bit more familiar, a bit more confident. So that first out lap, it's always a bit of an irrelevance. It's only really the last sector that perhaps you can put any real credence to. But on this lap, we'll see what the gap is going to be on the run up towards Senior. 3 seconds at the start of it, and now 2.2. So certainly Mike David Ortmann is chipping away. That's another 4.10s pullback in the middle sector alone.
Always a little tricky to be the second driver in the car because the first driver gets that warm-up lap, gets comfortable in the car, has the start of the race to really start building confidence, whereas when you're the second driver in the car, you are expected to jump in, no warm-up, and be absolutely on the limit straight away. And it's very, these are the more experienced driver, but it's still a very, very tough thing to ask, as we have Antoine Potti in the Toyota now that he's taken over from Romain Monti, and that car should be a little higher up than it is. It's down at 14th right now.
Yeah, it lost masses of time, didn't it, towards the end of Monty's stint here, and Antoine Potti is going to have to work very, very hard to try and claw that time back. The leaders are heading up towards the end of the lap, and when they break the beam, that 3 seconds might be hovering at sort of 1.7, 1.8-ish, given the way that Ortmann has been going. There is Potti leading a whole battle pack of cars behind him. Juliet has gone through. Mike Ortmann goes through 1.7. There you go. So not a bad prediction. The gap between those two for the race lead coming down all the time. There, number 38 going through is the little Alpine, the car of Julien Brichet now, taking it over from Jean-Laurent Navarro. But Antoine Potti not only is a long way down, but he can't get away from this traffic because he's got them absolutely stacked up behind him.
Another car that lost time in pit lane, and we were actually watching it, weren't we, when it was stationary in the pits, was the Camaro of Dante Reponge, because that was 10 seconds slower in the pit lane than it should have been, and that is why it has dropped to 5th position. It should be ahead of Benjamin Lariche in the number 3 Audi, but very much behind because it's spent far too long stationary. Didn't see any problems with it when we were watching it, did we?
No, unless it wouldn't restart. Sometimes when the cars get so hot, they don't like restarting. It could be something as innocuous as that. And they're clattering up the inside line. Alex Fontana leans on Jim Pla. So you've got 2 real GT front runners there going toe-to-toe, and Jim Pla says, oh, no, you don't. And now to try and get up to both of them is Adam Carroll. Look, having taken over from Tim Whale, the McLaren dive bombs the Porsche on the inside. Adam Carroll goes through. That was a nice pass, wasn't it?
Well, these guys, oh, now Fontana's run a little bit wide. He's going to lose another position, at least if it's not 2 positions. It is. Cars scrabbling for grip on the outside line. That's the Porsche there of Steele and Gilbert, 21st and 22nd position.
Yeah, Henrik Still then in the yellow-roofed Porsche goes ahead of Alex Fontana as well. So there is Adam Carroll in the Greystone GT McLaren. Mark McLaughlin's team that has done a fantastic job with these cars, and also McLaren's in GT Cup. The little Alpine rather impudently tries to gain ground as well coming into the chicane, but Adam Carroll now is going to be on a real mission. He's got himself up a couple of places, so Adam Carroll 20th at the start of the lap, still pushing on. The leading Pro-Am, incidentally, at the moment, remains number 17, the Raponge Herriman's car. The leading Am is Casarban and Lombert. And number 26 Audi being given a drive-through for causing a collision as there Jean-Luc Moulic's car, now with Jim Pla at the wheel, is being monstered by Adam Carroll in the McLaren. Antoine Potty returns from Toulon, having gone way out wide, and gets back onto the circuit with the sat-nav working overtime to direct him roughly to an apex. But this battle pack turns out of Beausset with so much variety, not only in terms of car, but in lines as well. Pla up the curb as he tries to get there past Rui Meohas.
Incredible variety of lines just to try and get through this traffic for some of our fastest drivers in the GT4 Series. Generally, Pla and Carroll with so much experience, not only in the world of GT racing for Jim Pla, and Adam Carroll's been in GTs for many years, but of course, pre that, single-seater in A1GP for Adam Carroll.
And of course, a winner already this year in British GT. Everyone bangs on, rightly, about the great effort that Jules Gounon put in at Alton Park in the first race, but it was Adam that fended him off, and they went on to the last lap as a virtual dead heat. It was a great drive by Jules, but Adam did an outstanding job in the Balfe Audi to fend him off. Now, Enzo Juliet, as you can see for the lead, has been caught by Mike Ortman. The margin is right down between the two of them as they swing onto the Mistral straight once more. We've still got 17 minutes to go, and with all due deference to Juliet, I can't see him defending for 17 more minutes unless Ortman's tyres start to go off.
If he does, then all it's going to do is slow the two of them down, and Constantin Lack now at the moment is 6 seconds back, so no trouble for Mike Ortman to worry about, but just takes a couple of laps of scrapping and defending and not being on the most efficient racing line, especially in a GT4 car that relies a bit more on momentum than outright grunt, and that third place car could be right with them, and then that's a much different challenge for Mike Ortman because he'll be looking in his mirrors as well as trying to attack.
Here are the leaders then. We're on lap number 19 with 16.5 minutes of the race to go as the field sweeps once more up through the Virage de la Tour and now on towards the completion of the lap. So it is Mercedes versus Aston Martin, very similar in concept, the way that the two brands have the cars designed with the big engine, front engine, really torquey cars coming out of the Virage du Pont up towards the timing line once more. This will put 19 laps in the book. We're aiming for 25, 26 laps, and through past the pits then goes Juliet. The margin is 0.3 of a second. It's more when, not if, Ortman gets through, isn't it?
Yes, but, you know, it's possible to keep defending. We did expect this to happen. We did expect Enzo Giulio to be caught, but at the moment, it's close enough for Ortman to dive through, but he's got to be careful, you know. He doesn't want to damage that car or indeed retire that car, so he needs to really think hard about how he does this efficiently without losing too much time. They've lost 0.2 of a second to Lachenauer on that last lap, even without really going side by side. Further back, though, it is absolute mayhem with Jim Pla, Adam Carroll in this. Vince Andronico's joined this party as well, and I don't know, there isn't really a racing line right now, is there? There's just a track full of cars.
Adam Carroll is trying to gain ground on the inside in the McLaren. It was the inside coming off the last corner. It's going to be the outside into turn one, and Adam Carroll is up into 17th place. This is for the race lead, which is about to change as Mike Ortman breaks late on the outside line. Couldn't do it there, so nose to tail into the chicane. Where does Mike Ortman make the challenge? It's going to have to be at Stint, isn't it? He's on the power nice and early, but he gets put on the outside line up towards the next corner. This is the lead battle then. To the outside line goes Mike Ortman. The Aston Martin will try and sweep round the outside. He's got his nose in front, coming into the corner. He's ahead. Does he get the apex? He does. That was a really good, brave move by Mike Ortman. Takes the race lead, uses the curb, but he doesn't run way, way wide out of all of that. And Mike Ortman is in the lead. Juliet tries to fight back, but he goes deep into Bosse, and Ortman now can start to build that margin.
That will give a bit more of a slingshot into this next section of turns, which does bring him back onto the tail of the Aston Martin, but there isn't really space to get down the inside there. And now Enzo Juli's best bet is to learn from what that Aston Martin is doing better and try and stay with him and potentially see if there's any mistakes that come out of Mike David Ortman in the last 14 minutes. Because, you know, when you do get passed by someone, there is always something to gain from that guy passing you, and to try and learn and try and up your speed.
Well, let's see what Mike Ortman can do in terms of pulling away. They come over the timing line, but I do feel, given the way that he's been catching, he should be able to pull away now. And so to Bedlam. Back to Stint. This is the battle that is going on all over the racetrack, all over the runoff area. At the head of it, kind of, is Jean-Luc Bobelic, so that's about 17th, 18th-ish. But now that Adam Carroll has got up and passed him, so Bobelic is dropping down the order within the overall and also Pro-Am standings. And so Bobelic now is being caught by the Moritz Viskirchen Porsche, but basically find a car, pick a place, because it changes almost corner by corner at the moment. So there is Bobelic. Behind him is, I think I'm right in saying, Moritz Viskirchen. You've also got Vincent Andronico in the mix, haven't you? Was that 22 Porsche? Over the timing line there goes Dante Rapponge leading in the Pro-Am contest. Sixth now is the BMW of Berke Bessler. Wilfried Casarbon has gone through, still clear in the AM contest. Antoine Leclerc going through 12th. Right here for 13th is Julien Brichet versus Adam Carroll. The Greystone McLaren pulls up to the outside line. Couldn't find a way through there, but not for the want of trying. Adam Carroll crawling all over the back of the little Alpine, and you would suggest, wouldn't you, given the way that McLaren is going, that another place is on here?
I don't know whether we've lost Moritz Viskirchen in the number 44, because he was up right at the sharp end of the field. There was a little touch there through Stint. Wow, really intense battling going on just on the outskirts of the top 10. But yes, Viskirchen was in 13th or 14th position, and now, according to our timing screens, has yet to finish the lap. So whether we've lost him or whether his transponders died, which we've seen a couple of the cars have problems, I'm not quite sure.
No yellow flag being indicated, so that means that the Cayman in that battle pack is Vincent Andronico, who was taking over from Andreas Mile. This is Carroll on the outside of Brichet, two really experienced drivers here. And although you were saying earlier on, this isn't really an Alpine circuit, certainly at the moment, Julien Brichet using all of his experience to keep Adam Carroll at bay. He knows his way around here pretty well. We have discovered 44 has stopped out on the circuit at turn 8, but right now Carroll on the tail of that little Alpine, goes one side then the other, but Brichet has got pointy elbows, sticks them out and forces Adam Carroll to the outside line.
What we did see yesterday is that McLaren has super pace when it's able to open itself up on the big straights, whether it be the start-finishing line here or around the back of the circuit on the two parts of the Mistral. It's always been very strong.
And that battle that you were just looking at is for third in Pro-Am, so it could be a podium for that McLaren, first podium in the championship if they can crack the Alpine. The lead gap is up into the margin of 0.8 of a second now, so Ortman is pulling away from Juliet. This is Konstantin Lachenauer, lapping quicker than the two ahead of him. He's got to make up 2.7 seconds, 11 minutes to go, but he is quicker than the two leaders.
Yeah, and Enzo Julie's not dropped off the back of that Aston Martin. Not close enough to make a pass, but certainly doing a good job to keep with him to an extent. But as you say, what can Konstantin Lachenauer do? 10 minutes remaining, so what's that, 4-5 laps remaining, but as you say, 1 second faster on the last lap than the leading two.
And off the road there drives Alexander Papadopoulos as he tries to gain a place at the expense of Kenton Koch. Well, he was ahead anyway, I think, when they went over the line, but that was one way of making sure he kept it, just make his own lineup.
I haven't spoken too much about Kenton Koch, who's a very experienced American driver in BMWs over in the IMSA series, but coming over here to learn his trade in the GT4 Championship and the European circuits. We did see him, I think, in the 24 Hours of Spa in a GT3 car last year, if memory serves.
He might be right, yes.
He loves his sim racing as well as his real racing, and Kenton right on the tail here of Papadopoulos. trying to get himself up into 7th spot. Tom Canning just behind them in 9th now in that Aston Martin, right with them, in fact.
Yeah, and looking to gain ground, so they break now for the chicane, and it is going to be Papadopoulos keeping Kenton Koch at bay. Just going back to your point about the Americans, of course, GT4 taken to America a few years ago and has been a real success straight away. Really, really big grids. And then, interestingly, quite a few of the drivers then come over to race the cars in Europe. So up towards senior, just ahead of them is Berke Besler. This is 7th, 8th and 9th you're looking at. Papadopoulos ahead of Koch, number 5. And then Tom Canning, the more experienced in a sense of the 3, but Tom, who won GT4 in the British GT Championship a few years back, tries to make a move, but it's Kenton Koch prizing open the door. Look on the inside at Beausset, and through he goes ahead of Papadopoulos.
Yeah, Papadopoulos jumping to the inside line to defend the early apex there through Beausset, but it does then push you wide and then reopens the door at the midpoint. And if you've got the apex at the end of that corner, then you're more likely to get the passing move done. So he would have been actually better off leaving the door open a little bit at the start and then trying to close it a little bit later on if Kenton Koch hadn't gone through. Interestingly, though, Tom Canning didn't follow through, so Koch up 1 position, but Tom Canning staying there in 9th spot for the moment. And they actually have dropped Will Casabon quite quickly. There's Casabon coming through shot now, and Casabon actually has the little Alpine 110 to worry about rather than fighting with the Astons ahead.
So the race leaders now 1 second between them, as again Tom Canning goes on the attack here to try to gain ground on the run in towards turn 1. So number 34, Alexander Papadopoulos, having dropped a place, might lose another one in the moment. Tom Canning is crawling all over the back of him. And the reason that we lost the Max Witzkirchen car you were talking about a little while ago, number 44 Porsche, it was a puncture, unable to return to the pits, according to the team.
Now, was that the car that we saw puff smoke going through senior, I wonder? Because he was part of that melee, so I wonder whether the contact has caused a puncture and therefore unable to continue.
Certainly a good thought. It would stand to reason, wouldn't it, around this circuit, as with just under 8 minutes to go, Tom Canning strives for another place. He knows that it can be done because Kenton Koch's Aston Martin has gone past. Papadopoulos under attack now. Tom Canning makes his move then to the outside, but that'll be the outside line for the first part of the chicane. And it's not really a flowing chicane, is it? The first 2 elements, there's a real straight, a short straight between them, but a straight nonetheless. And Canning on the outside line tries to stand his ground. He's got the inside now, but that's going to put him on the outside line for the next part, the inside for senior, and he can't get the job done.
And all you do there is just slow both of you up and invite the guys behind to come and join the party. So Canning now into the slipstream. Does he have more momentum up the second part of the Mistral straight? Comes to the outside line for senior, but he doesn't have any kind of an overlap. He's going to have to do what Kenton Koch did last lap and get down the inside into the second part of Beausset. Once again, Papadopoulos defends the first part, which will then run him wide through the second part. Here comes the Aston Martin down the inside. Is there a overlap? Not quite. Just not quite close enough to be able to do what Kenton Koch did before. Battle for second.
Side by side, and that is Lachenau making the move. So he goes ahead of Enzo Juliet. The disappointment of Luc Ibanez is palpable, isn't it? Because he led all the way through his stint, and the car that he now has to watch has dropped from 1st to 2nd to 3rd. And so now Constantin Lachenau up into 2nd spot. Now with 6.5 minutes to go, he was only 1 second off the race leader. Lachenau could be on yet to even have a say in the overall outcome for the top step of the podium here.
Double winners in Imola, first time out this season. That pairing of Gus Bowers and Constantin Lachenau. And this will be really good for the championship, even if they finish there in 2nd position. But to get 3 wins out of 4 races would be really, really strong for a brand new team to GT4 racing this year.
Well, indeed, there Tom Canning, a little bit stuck now. He's got himself in that battle, but he can't really progress through it. 89 you're looking at is Wilfried Casalbon. He's been given a hard time by the Simon Thiermann Alpine, but Wilfried Casalbon is so far ahead of the class opposition that he can afford really to keep out of everybody's way. Look, leaves the door open there, so Wilfried Casalbon would like not to lose places, but he doesn't have to really fight for this. So Mike Ortmann versus now Constantin Lachenau is what we're looking at as Benjamin Lariche runs in 4th place. This is the Pro-Am leading V8 Racing Chevrolet. Long pit stop, as Ben was mentioning a while ago, but again, they're quite a long way up the road in the class. So here, the main aim is just to tick off the laps, take the points in class, and take a maiden victory in the category for the Chevrolet. Behind in 6th place, about another of the silvers, Berke Besler under attack now from a rapidly closing Kenton Koch. For the race lead, faster in Sector 1 was the Mike Ortmann Aston, and in sector 2 it was the Lachenau Aston. So I think Konstantin Lachenau, now that he has made that pass, is being able to just chip away. Here they come onto the pit straight. The gap last time between them when it was first to third was 1 second. This time they are the top 2. Looks like it's going to be less than a second, but where do we put it as they break the beam? The margin between them is 0.6.
It's on. 2 laps remaining, and it is very much on. The other man continuing to really push, Kenton Koch in 7th position, taking chunks of time out of Berke Bessler in the BMW. The best of the BMWs is 6th right now, but Kenton Koch looking really, really racy. He had a back marker in front of him going down the Mistral straight, and he wants to get onto the tail and at least pass Berke Bessler, which would then put them 5th in class, 6th overall.
So this for the race lead. There's certainly 1 more lap to go at the end of this, possibly even 2. We'll look at the clock when they break the beam. So as far as Konstantin Lachenau is concerned, he has got to push, push, push. It was a decent stint by Gus Bowers, but Lachenau has really got the car alive, hasn't he? And Mike Ortman, we know he's not slow. Yesterday's winner then, hanging onto the advantage, but it's being eroded in front of your very eyes. A personal best by Lachenau in the first sector. He takes another 3/10 out there. He's trying to unsettle Ortman. He's certainly quicker in a straight line, and he got a bit of a toe as well. Into the chicane they come, and look up the road. There's some back markers that they're going to have to factor into this lead fight as well.
Canning's got ahead of Papadopoulos for 8th position, but lost 5 seconds to Kenton Koch in doing so. So no chance to progress any further for the Brit.
Race leaders then now make the run up towards Senior through that right-hander, and Lachenau hustles on. He could not be closer really to Mike Ortman now, could he? Those slower cars will be encountered. They're going to get at least 1 more lap out of this. Remember, a flying lap is around about the 2:14 mark. They might have time even for 2. So if they are over a lap time left in the race when they get to the beam, it will be 2 more laps, and I think they are going to get 2 more laps. So they come towards the Virage de la Tour and then up towards Virage du Pont. So the leading Aston Martin of Mike Ortman could be on borrowed time. Lachenau straddles the curb there as he tries to gain another 10th. They come now into Virage du Pont, and it is going to be 2 more laps. There'll be time at the end of the one they're about to start for 1 more before the checkered flag, and that's good news for Lachenau.
Mike David Ortman there on the inside line into Virage du Pont, almost on a defensive line. He now flashes his lights at the traffic. He might be able to play this traffic cleverly, use it to his advantage, because there'll be cars occupying racetrack. He goes to the inside line at turn 1, but Lachenau can't go to the outside because there is a back marker there, so he's survived that onslaught, but that's only one of a number that we'll see in the next 2 laps. He's got, David Ortman is on borrowed time here, but he will be defending very hard, no doubt.
Now, what does he do with this traffic? He doesn't want to get stuck behind it, but equally, he doesn't want to commit and get himself in stride, so he's got to time it right. Ideally, he'd like to nip past a slower car and then use that as a sort of buffer to delay Lachenau. But right now, Lachenau is looking the quicker of the 2. We saw how good he was on the Mistral straight last time, ready to attack. Can he do it again here?
What will the Audi do to help? It looks a bit sorry, that Audi, doesn't it? On the front right corner's been all taped up, so that's obviously had a bit of an issue in this race. We did see that one, I think. Is that the one that was penalised for contact?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
So the Astons clear it, but there's no opportunity because of the track position of that Audi for either of them really to benefit. Certainly not for Lachenau to think about a move, but he's tidier through the chicane, isn't he? And he gets a better run, I would suggest, onto the Mistral.
A little bit of understeer from Mike Ortman there, just compromising his exit speed, compromising his momentum down the Mistral straight. Like now to the outside line, but there is no overlap with these 2 equal machines. We would have seen it if it was a Mercedes versus Aston. We probably would have seen a difference in pace down there, but they're the same car. So it really has to go down to the skill of these 2 drivers as to sort out who will take victory and who will be second. A nice wide line from Lachenau to try and carry the momentum up into the second part of this last sector.
So he ran it wide there, fires across for the apex of the corner. Up now towards the end of the 26th lap they come. 1 more at the end of this, nose to tail. It was a 10th when they crossed the line. Lachenau has done all the hard work of catching. He's trying to force a mistake out of Mike Ortman, who can be as slow as he wants, as long as he's defending from that hard-charging Konstantin Lachenau, Aston Martin behind. Here they come, turn right then now, onto the pit straight. And as Ben makes the point, these cars so evenly matched, same brand, but out of different teams, it really is going to have to be a real send by Lachenau or a mistake from Mike Ortman. And where does Lachenau do it? Does he get a toe down to turn 1? Ortman just blends to the middle of the road to fend off Lachenau, who tries the outside, but it ain't going to happen there. Last lap then now of what has been an enthralling race.
Again, that defensive move, though, compromising the exit speed. Gus Bowers Konstantin Lachnow drawing back onto the tail of the leading Aston Martin, but there isn't really a big braking zone to throw it down the inside here. Needs to do the same thing into the final part of this sector of the lap, which is the big braking zone here. And again, there isn't much space, and again, we've got traffic to contend with as well.
Towards the Mistral they come, nose to tail once more. Lachnow possibly now running out of ideas, and if anything there, Ortmann looked like he gained a length back once again. So what does Lachnow do? Does he absolutely commit, throw it up the inside, or does he bank points for the championship? Of course he'd like a win, but Konstantin Lachnow intelligent enough to know that if a move isn't on, there's no point doing it, because the points that they scored at Imola, absolutely crucial for that championship lead, and another second place here would be very useful indeed. Nose to tail into the chicane, that brings him back into the equation with a third of a lap to go.
Kenton Koch has got ahead of Berke Bessler for 6th spot. I thought that was going to happen. Koch's pace has been really, really good, and he is now up into 6th.
We've also had a change for 2nd in Pro-Am. Adam Carroll has got himself up past Brichet and Andronico and Pla. So Carroll 11th, 2nd in Pro-Am. But for the overall race lead now, the two of them absolutely nose to tail, turn their way through Beausset. Again, Lachnow goes a little bit wider, and that costs him a length, doesn't it? So Mike Ortmann, fair play to him. He's done a really good job of defending, but he's got another 3 corners to defend for. Everywhere Lachnow wants to go, Ortmann's already committed to the line, but Mike Ortmann just has that slight edge coming off the corner. 2 of them to go, and I think Lachnow is going to have to settle for 2nd place, but it won't be for the want of trying again his way up the curb. But there's a back marker right ahead of them with a corner to go. Mike Ortmann has to commit to a line. He goes for the inside. The Alpine keeps out of the way. Lachnow dives through as well. The drag race to the line gives a win for Mike Ortmann and Hugo Sassa, but only just, because nose to tail they come up towards the line, and Mike Ortmann stays ahead when it counts. Checkered flag flies. It is a win by 0.204 of a second. Great drive by Mike Ortmann to defend. Great drive by Konstantin Lachnow there to take the fight to him. And
great drive by those back markers who were getting right in the way at the last turn, and a couple of them having to go completely off track. Here's this battle further back as Jim Pla throws it down the inside of Papadopoulos. Papadopoulos losing more positions on this last lap. Was up in 8th position. I think we've already had a couple of cars past him. Yes, is that Adam Carroll slowing though? The McLaren slowing on the last lap on the left-hand side.
It is. The first podium for Greystone GT has gone away, and he's got damage. There's something flapping underneath, so Adam Carroll, after a fantastic penultimate lap, has got drama on the last, and so Pro-Am is all going to shuffle on the run up towards the line then. The McLaren is limping into the last corner, but something has gone horribly awry right at the very end. So Pro-Am is won by Dante Raponge and Kenny Heremans. 2nd will be Pla and Bobalik, and 3rd in Pro-Am, Vincent Andronico and Andreas Mayr. After all of that, and poor old Adam Carroll limps towards the line. He has not yet made it. We wait for him to break the beam, and he's been swamped by traffic. He is crawling towards the line.
He's going to miss it as well. There he is.
It's expired before the beam. Doesn't even get to the line. He could get up and push it, but, oh, yeah, the car starts up again. Oh, now, all of a sudden with pace. Like it's been a Control-Alt reset. But anyway, Adam Carroll, sad to say, has made it to the line badly delayed in 29th place, and that certainly is not representative of his performance nor the cars. It was the last couple of corners, as Ben identified. Suddenly it slowed after a really impressive drive. But 2 out of 2 for Hugo Sassa and Mike Ortmann, and 4 out of 4 for Aston Martin.
Yeah, you definitely want an Aston Martin this year, don't you? 2 quite different circuits in terms of character as well. The Imola circuit versus this Ricard circuit, but indeed we've seen 4 Astons on the top row, the top step of the podiums across our 4 races. 2 different teams, and the next round will be in Misano, which is quite a different circuit again for these guys, but Aston Martin seemingly the car to have. What a great battle though, and what a great drive from Mike Ortmann to withstand all that pressure. He did have to defend for about 3 or 4 laps, and it felt inevitable that Konstantin Lachnow would get past. But here is a replay. Ooh, McLaren has hit something on the exit there of the left-hander. And the curbs are pretty flat there, but maybe there is a sort of a bit of a sausage curb on the very exit. So he's caught that, and maybe suspension damage.
Possibly, although the fact that the car ground to a halt and then restarted. It looked like a Control-Alt-Delete, but I don't quite understand why it was sort of fading away after a curb strike. Anyway,
the
team, yeah, possibly. We'll ponder that in a moment, but let's try and unravel the result, because certainly Pro-Am was being changed markedly towards the very end, and it's a win in the end overall for Mike Ortman and Hugo Sasser. Then 2 out of 2 for the Pro Sport Racing team this weekend. Second, Constantin Lachnau and Gus Bowers. Fourth and a second, good for them in the championship. And Enzo Julier and a rather frustrated Luc Ibaniev taking third. Benjamin Lariche and Robert Constantin keeping out of trouble today for fourth, ahead of Kenny Heremans and Dante Raponge. Timon Nabors and Kenton Cox sixth from Will Burns and Berke Besler. Akira Bendra and Tom Canning eighth from Pierre Sonsinena and Simon Thierman. And Jean-Luc Bobelic and Jim Clark come home in 10th place. 14th, the winning Am, Wilfried Casarbon and Julien Lambert. Absolutely light years up the road compared to the class opposition. So a very lively race. There, the rest of the order being confirmed as the cars battle their way across the line, and in the end, despite a penalty, Adrien Tombe and Greg Faisal coming home in 20th place. The second of the AMs, Mauro and Benjamin Ricci in 23rd, and the third of the AMs, Stanislav Savronov and Alexandra Weintraub coming through in 26th. And 29th for Adam Carroll and Tim Whale does not certainly tell you the story of their race, but illustrates in part the need to keep off those curbs, doesn't it, even on the last lap. So there are the winners. Mike Ortman and Hugo Sasser have done it again, and this is making for a really fascinating Silver Cup in the championship. Let's see if we can grab a word with our 2 race winners, because they are celebrating again, and a second victory of the season. Hugo Sasser and Mike Ortman are ready for a word.
Boys, that was an incredible drive. Mike, that last push, you must have really felt the pressure from Constantin.
Yeah, there was like a lot of pressure. The front tires were really gone, but it was a nice fight, fair always. Both races. I'm just so happy for the team and for everybody. Yeah, I think we have to celebrate when we are back home.
Definitely think celebrations are on the card, right?
Yeah, after yesterday is like the cherry on top of the cake, and we are really happy. Mike did an amazing job with the tires at the end, so now we can celebrate the weekend.
Congratulations, well done.
Thank you.
Well, it was a really good job, a good defensive drive by Mike Ortman, but of course it was a good attacking drive in the first place to get onto terms with and then pass Enzo Julier.
How interesting that the cherry on the cake translates into German.
Yes.
Hugo Sasser there.
Cherry on the strudel.
Doing a great job. No, absolutely. The other man really to shout out, Luc Ibanez, did such a good job on his first stint to create a gap. Obviously, that's the first race of the season we haven't had a safety car of 4, because we had safety cars in both of our Imola races. But therefore, that gap that was created translates to the second driver. And Ibanez, as you said, might be a little frustrated not to have got any further. Big shout out to the 22 car. We'd thought weekend was written off with not qualifying in the first race, starting at the back and then not having a very good pace in the second, and they get themselves on the podium.
Yeah, Vincent Andronica, Andreas Meyer third in Pro-Am. Well, what about Constantin Lachnau and Gus Bowers? So near and yet so far.
Constantin, you put in an incredible charge on that final closing few laps.
It was a great charge. Well, first of all, thanks to Gus's stint, which was amazing, giving me the car in perfect position. It's not quite first place, but we had a good fight. It's good points for a championship, which is, we know it's on the long term. Good fight as well, of course, a lot of experience gained, and just happy to bring our Aston Martin Vantage GT4 back to a P2 podium.
Gus, the cars were so incredibly well matched, weren't they, between yourself and first?
Yeah, honestly, it was. I was kind of in no man's land, but obviously after not getting a podium, just missing out yesterday, I'm so happy to get it today. Constantin did all the hard work here. But yeah, Aston Martin have just been excellent. The racing spirit of Le Mans have just been excellent. Yeah, it's just been a great weekend for us and a good points haul for the championship.
Well done, thank you very much.
Well, it was a good drive, and they missed out by a 10th of a second. The fastest lap, going back to Ben's point about the impressive stint of Luc Ibanez, he did that in the 9th lap of the 27. So a very, very good race indeed. That car finishing in third. And yes, another hat tip to the drivers. Close, exciting it was, but yes, without a safety car, that's what we like.
And without too much fisticuffs and elbowing. There was the odd elbow, but that was it, really.
Now, what about our Pro-Am winners? Kenny Heremans and Dante Raponge take honours there for the first time this year in the Chevrolet Camaro.
Dante, you're looking very hot. You worked very hard, but it was worth it for the class win.
Yeah, it was definitely worth it. It was a hard race, hot inside the car, but I'm very happy with the result, so it was all worth it.
Absolutely. To get that class win just means everything, right? The smile says it all.
Oh yeah, this it's just amazing. The feeling after this race, it's amazing weather, Paul Ricard, perfect weather conditions, really hot in the car, like 60 degrees or something. Yeah, it was, everything fell on place, and we just needed to manage the car just off the curbs and didn't do anything stupid. And yeah, we're just incredibly happy, I guess.
Yeah. Absolutely. Congratulations. Well done.
A very hot and bothered Dante Raponge talking about the cockpit temperatures. Dante's Inferno, probably, therefore. But he takes the class win. 5th overall, which is a really good effort. New to the championship this season, and a first Pro-Am win. Well done to them. Let's look at the highlights then of that race. An hour of it crammed into a couple of minutes with an awful lot on the cutting room floor, because a lot happened right from the get-go, with Luke Ibanez taking the race lead into turn 1, with the rest of the traffic all queued up behind. Battles were raging on right from the very start across all of the classes, and 1 or 2 finding themselves in strife at the chicane, forcing a variety of lines off-road to avoid contact, and then trying to blend back in without further incident. As Ibanez led, so up into 2nd spot was Hugo Sassa. He brought the gap down a little, but then it stabilised as lower down the field we had contact as Jean-Luc Bobelic was getting involved with number 26 Audi. That got turned around, and Robert Consony was another man on a mission in number 3 Audi R8, forcing his way up the order, with Will Burns also trying to buy into this battle with Christophe Amon, the GT4 Motorsport Audi. A retirement, though, by the halfway point. Pit window opened, everybody cycled through, Ibanez giving over the car to Enzo Juliet, but in the end that car just could not maintain the pace of the first driver. Juliet fell to 2nd, then he fell to 3rd, and it meant that this Aston Martin, charging on in the hands of Mike Ortman, would relieve the Mercedes of the race lead, but then itself would be caught by Constantin Lachenau's similar Aston Martin. This was the move for the lead, as Mike Ortman lined him up on the Mistral straight, committed to the inside line, and was able to get through and run the outside, it seemed, to cement the move. So Ortman it was then that started to edge away, but Lachenau was closing as well, as the Viskirchen Porsche got a rub and a punctured tyre that put him out of the race. Lachenau got himself onto the back of the Mike Ortman Aston, missed out on a win by 1/5 of a second, meaning it's 2 out of 2 for Mike Ortman and Hugo Sassa at Paul Ricard in another all-action round of GT4 European Series. So they're the drivers at the podium. We have the Silvers, the Pro-Ams and the Ams all ready to go. So we'll do the Silvers first, and being brought forward first of all are Enzo Juliet and Luke Ibanez, the Spanish driver who has been a mainstay of the GT4 European Series. New co-driver for this year, Dario Lloveras, not partnering him. Enzo Juliet brought in, and after leading for his stint, 3rd is the ultimate reward for Luke Ibanez for the NM Racing team. Then for 2nd place, up will step Gus Bowers and Constantin Lachenau. Gus Bowers with his moustache looking like a fighter pilot for my money, and taking the fight to the other Aston Martin opposition over the course of the weekend. And then for the top step, it is going to be their now familiar Paul Ricard haunt, because 2 out of 2 for Hugo Sassa and Mike Ortman after a great defensive drive right on those last 2 or 3 laps by Mike Ortman to hang on to a race win, and you can see how much that means to them.
Worth pointing out also that these 3 were 22 seconds up the road from the 4th place car, so the pace of these 3 from the podium absolutely spellbinding in comparison to the rest of our GT4 European Series field.
So the anthem plays as the Pro Speed team, the German squad, celebrates victory. Peter Corren, engineer from Pirelli, steps forward with the trophies for the 3rd place drivers. We're back to the traditional way of doing podiums here after the pandemic rather changed podiums to the point where you collected a trophy, posed for a photograph and shuffled off. Now everybody is back together again on the podium. Thankfully no masks anymore. And there you have the second place trophies for Constantin Lachnauer and Gus Bowers. And then the top step for Pro Speed, a team that's been a regular on this grid in the German Championship as well, but it's weekend of weekends, because to win one against 50 cars is hard work. To do it twice over a weekend, just like we saw from the Racing Spirit of Le Mans team at Imola, it's quite something. Hugo Sassa and Mike Ortman win again at Paul Ricard. So the Silver Cup top 3 drivers are let loose with the champagne. And the celebrations underway.
I was wondering whether the sound was part of the podium celebration or was something else, but we've got GT1 Sports Club going out to serve.
That's right, yes,
so
good.
The Pagani's out there.
Good musical backdrop. Well, this is what it does to the championship. Constantin Lachnauer and Gus Bowers are 31 points ahead, but Mike Ortman and Hugo Sassa are now the nearest opposition. Then it's Tom Canning and Akil Rabindra ahead of Rui Meerhaus and Erwin Bastard, Enzo Juliet and Luc Ibanez now 5th.
And that gap is due to the fact that they didn't appear at the second race in Imola and didn't score points in the first after contact. So that's the reason why there's such a big gap between our top two Aston crews.
So the Silver Cup giving us plenty of drama, as I think we rather anticipated, which is a very strong class numerically. Now, what about the other podiums? We'll turn to Pro-Am and to the AMs as the Silvers head off the steps down towards the media centre. So Pro-Am is going to be next, and it should be, there in the natty red boots, Andreas Mayel and Vincent Andronico, who will step forward for 3rd place. Now that's quite a result, as you were making the point, from the back of the grid in the opening race.
Yeah, from not having a time in the opening race after having issues in qualifying, made contact with another car in qualifying, had the damage, and so did one lap, but that lap was then taken away from them. The pace wasn't really there in the second part of qualifying for Andreas Mayel either, so they started way down in this field, and to get a podium, great efforts from Vincent Andronico in a very, very busy second stint of that race. All of these pro drivers really earned their money to get on the podium. Well, certainly, Dante Raponge and our leaders had a relatively chilled in comparison to the rest of them.
We've seen Jean-Luc Bobelic and Jim Pla arrive on the podium for 2nd, and there are the Pro-Am winners for the first time. Kenny Herreman's new to the championship this year, Dante Raponge new to the championship this year. I think the Chevrolet Camaro is a big fan favourite anyway, and to have 2 new young guns going so nicely is really impressive, and the V8 racing team celebrates a rare and overdue victory here at Paul Ricard. So, as in the background, the Sports Club customer cars do their demonstration laps. The podium ceremony underway then for our drivers from Pro-Am, and the trophies come for the 3rd place drivers, Vincent Andronico and Andreas Mayel, who damaged the car yesterday, didn't he? He went off the road in his stint in the race that we had yesterday.
Yes, and that car started with a 3-place grid penalty as well, didn't it? So has not been the easiest of weekends for the Porsche crew, and to be on a podium with such a competitive grid just shows that they really fought. Oh, that Bugatti sounds good. They really did feel, they did really fight back from what has been a difficult weekend for them.
Trophies presented then to Jim Pla and Jean-Luc Bobelic, now to the category winners Kenny Herremans and Dante Raponge, and already V8 Racing have started the celebrations. The champagne is sprayed, and it's going to get messy, that podium. Next stop for the teams is the Italian Misano circuit, first weekend of July. Very different style of circuit from what we have here.
But a bit closer to the Imola circuit, and Aston Martin was still strong there.
Very
so
true.
Interestingly, Andronico was only 0.2 of a second ahead of Fontana at the line, so it was very, very close to missing out on the podium for those two. A great fight behind Papadopoulos, who was the kind of cork in the bottle on those last couple of laps.
So the Pro-Am drivers then make their way off the podium, and the AMs await their turn, where it is going to be for third place, the crew from NM Racing Team, Stanislav Sovranov and Alexander Weintraub. They're about to be called forward. So there the NM Racing Team drivers await their names to be shouted. Alexander Weintraub and Stanislav Sovranov step forward. So a podium result in this company is still something to be celebrated. For second place, it is the Acodis ASP Mercedes team of Benjamin and Mauro Ricci. And then the top step of the AM podium will go the way of Julien Lambert and Wilfried Casabon, Ben, who rather dominated that class from the start of the race.
It was looking quite good as a fight, wasn't it, when we had the Christophe Amon number 69 Audi there with them. But unfortunately, with the retirement, the contact and then retirement of that car, rather left them right at the head of the field.
And with absolutely nobody able to take the fight to them. So it's a real family affair here on the top step of the AM podium. Congratulations then to the winning drivers out of the AM class. So there you see in the black overalls, Alexander Weintraub and Stanislav Sovranov. At the other end of the podium, Mauro and Benjamin Ricci, who regularly race together in this GT4 European Series and the French Championship. They did race in the Gulf 12 Hours in GT3 machinery at the start of the year, but it's GT4 in which they race most normally and most usually. And there, to the combination of the Lambert and Casabon families on the top step, the trophies will be presented. Julien Lambert and Wilfried Casabon, category winners, category dominators, it must be said, over the course of that hour of the race. And very, very happy drivers, very happy younger members of the family, all able to celebrate. And if I were those three, I'd get out of the way, because that champagne is probably going to head in their direction. And oh dear, bit late.
That's another Aston Martin as well on the top step of the podium. Certainly doing a great job, the AMR squad this year in GTs.
This is how we look in the AM Championship now then. Julien Lambert and Wilfried Casabon ahead of Christophe Amon and Michel Blanchimont, who didn't finish that race and therefore are just 1 point up on Alexander Weintraub and Stanislav Sovranov, now with Benjamin and Mauro Ricci in fourth. And the Pro-Am Championship is also, of course, affected by what we've had over the course of the two races here. And in Pro-Am, the situation now is Jean-Luc Bobelic and Jim Pla 4 points up on Alex Fontana and Ivan Jacoma. Vincent Andronico and Andreas Weil are ahead of Kenny Heremans and Dante Raponge. Next stop then will be Misano, first weekend of July. Very different circuit, but can anybody stop the rather Aston Martin domination, the steamroller in the championship? We'll find out. For now, from Ben and David, it's goodbye.